So as long as there has been injustice, there have been women against injustice, right? From anti-lynching societies to Moms Demand Action Against Gun Violence, from the mothers of the disappeared on the plaza in Argentina who had danced with the photographs of their missing loved ones, to the Mothers in the Movement, which is a group now that speaks out who have had their children die at the hands of police, to the persistent widow that we hear this morning. So to be clear, there are two types of widows in the scripture. You know, in the Hebrew Bible, we kind of think of widows as vulnerable and needy and unable to plead their own case, so they're lumped in with the orphans and the foreigners who need to be cared for. And then there's also the widows who show up like Ruth and Naomi and Judith and Tamar, who use their body and their money and even their cunning and even violence to get what they want. And Luke, he is not comfortable with that kind of widow. So he takes the parable today, which is verses 2 through 5, which is this kind of, rough, tough woman, and he kind of surrounds it. And he starts with the first verse, which says, I'm going to tell you a parable about prayer. And then the parable has nothing to do with prayer. And then at the very end, he's like, and see, if God will get the unjust judge to judge, to do correctly, surely God will answer all your prayers. And which we hope, right? I mean, we hope that what we long for, a world of justice and peace and joy and abundance, will come to pass. But in the middle, 2 through 5, you've got this parable, and there are two characters, right? There is the corrupt and unjust judge. Now, he is actually never called corrupt and unjust. Instead, he says, I don't respect God and I don't respect people. And then to make the point, Luke turns around and repeats it again. The guy says it. It's his own interior monologue. That's something Luke likes to do, where the person says the quiet part out loud. Because I don't respect God or people. So this is a character, right, who is the center of the universe, right? Has no regard, no sense that there might be some creative, mysterious element that created this gorgeous earth that we should care for, nor does he have any sense that he is in, connection or covenant with anyone around him. We probably can think of some leaders like that, right, who are just simply the center of the world. But then he says, but since this widow is continually coming, right? I mean, the Greek is like, she's the woman who's showing up at the school board. She's continually coming. She will not stop. So he says, I will grant her justice, or the Greek is actually vengeance, against her opponent, lest she keep bothering me and then wear me out. But the Greek is actually not bothering me, which is kind of a stereotype of women. Women nag, women are a bother. The Greek is actually, she's making work for me. This woman keeps coming. She's making work for me. She's sand in the gears. This is like all the people who have showed up, from the attorneys to the activists to the nuns, who have kept that core civic, that private prison, from opening now for 9 months, right? 9 months that ISIS wanted to put people there. That is called being sand in the gears. We all want to win the good, right? We all want a world where every kid has enough to eat and we can protect this earth, but sometimes you got to stop the bad, right? It's not just winning the good, it's stopping the bad. She is slowing him down. He is not like that. And then it says, unless she wear me out. But again, the Greek is, what is the Greek? Unless she gives me a black eye. Well, that's a little bit of a different thing than wearing someone out. Just like vengeance is. I mean, it's a strong verb there. I saw one of my good friends who's a rabbi who is much more hawkish on Israel than any other colleague I have, and she was telling me about her high holiday sermon in which she preached about basically her own lack of compassion and desire for vengeance, and some story about a Palestinian grandmother killed, and she just said her first thought was, well, she's probably a terrorist. I mean, I was just like, wow, you're right. And but I mean, to own that, right? So that's in the scripture. This woman wants vengeance against her opponent, right? I mean, you could imagine maybe someone who's been abused or hurt who, wants to get the person back. And you can see the temptation to soften that. And, let me tell you about a parable about prayer, which is not about prayer. But you can see that we're sometimes uncomfortable, right, with that strength. But if you stay with the parable for a minute, there's a little bit of, there's some wisdom in there. I think of the work of Erica Chenoweth. Some of you may have heard of her. She teaches at Harvard in the Kennedy School of Governance. She teaches human rights and international policy, and she's she's written the book on civil resistance, what everyone needs to know. And this is kind of her thing. She's, MacArthur genius and all that. She's the one who has written exhaustively. She's got this index in the back where they have looked at every single action of civil resistance from 1900 to the present. And in that, they've come up with that 3.5% rule, that when you get 3.5% of the people, which in our country would be about 11 million activated, we had 7 million at the rallies yesterday, then things start to change. And in her book, which I love because it's like 100 chapters, but they're all like 2 or 3 pages, she's got like why actors are important, why humor is important, why comedy, why dance, why all these things help bring, because her field of study is authoritarian figures and how they're put into place, and then the actions that bring them down, and how different characters interact, like the role of students. And one of the groups that's really important, without which no resistance movement since World War II has succeeded, or almost none, would be women. And any kind of resistance movement that excludes women has a very poor chance of succeeding for a couple of reasons. Like, one, well, they're half the population, right? And then 2, women are have a lot of connections, right? They're just the source of connection. And like when you're talking about things like boycotts or strikes, women are often the ones, especially in traditional societies, who know how the goods get to places, right? They know how alternative means. And then women are kind of also granted more room to do creative things like pots and pans brigades, where people go out in these Central American countries and just make a heck of a lot of noise. And then women also kind of elicit maybe more sympathy when they're mistreated. So I'm thinking of Oriana Corral. Some of you may have seen the video of her, 38-year-old child family therapist, mother of a 3-year-old, who's in a brass band that kind of does, shows up at rallies in Portland. And there's this video of her that went viral where she was assaulted by ICE and just thrown to the ground, and she was like, her face is smushed and all that. And she was playing Ghostbusters on her clarinet, right? That's what she was doing. She was playing Ghostbusters on her clarinet when she was assaulted, taken off to jail, taken across the state line, put in jail, held for 3 days without bond. And in response to scenes like this, right, the House Majority Leader, Mike Johnson, has said there's been no overstepping of any kind of, ICE or anything. Instead, the most threatening thing, I'm sure many of you saw his quote, the most threatening thing he said he has seen is what? The bicyclers naked in Portland, right? The most threatening thing. And you're kind of like, can he be serious, right? Is that a joke? Except for, what's true? He's actually threatened. You know why? Because people who do things like that rely on, guess what? They rely on people staying home, people closing their curtains when ICE comes, right? That's what they rely on. They rely on people are too afraid to act. And they also rely on this narrative that says all these people who showed up are jihadists and terrorists and all that. So I don't know if some of you have seen the Portland Chicken, the first guy kind of out there, 26-year-old Jack Dickinson. And he was interviewed about kind of why he was doing what he was doing. And he was talking about, again, the people kind of orchestrating all these raids, depend on fear. And he said, when we show up in an absurdist manner, right, like in these costumes, it both shows that, guess what? We're not afraid. We're not afraid. And it also kind of unveils the ridiculous narrative. He said, like when you have to put Kristi Noem up on the top of a building and she's supposedly looking over the Antifa army, and you look down there and it's 8 journalists and 6 protesters, and one of them's in an inflatable chicken suit. I mean, it's like, really? Are you really serious? And Ruth Ben-Jihad, who writes, she's a scholar, she again covers authoritarian figures, and she teaches at New York University, and she's talked about this guy who the administration has talked about. These guys are all so stupid. Well, he actually has a math degree, and then his master's is in economics in game theory. And Jihad has written a lot about game theory and coordination games and coordination trap, and which I didn't understand, but my son, who finished his master's, we were breaking it down yesterday, and he was saying, the issue, and basically what she's saying is this truth. People behave in a way based on what they think other people will do. So, you're going to go out to a rally, you're going to be the only person, why give up your whole afternoon? If there's going to be 7 million people, you might get out there, right? So it's like the more people who take, action, the more you feel your action's going to matter, and the less you feel afraid, the less risk you feel. Like Ben was like, whether you're trying to get people to plant trees and get tree cover, or whether you're just trying to get people to show up. Like if they think other people are going to do this and we're going to soon have this huge tree canopy over Jacksonville, then they'll do it, right? So it's all this. And talking about this, she went on to say the funny thing and the great thing about having these characters show up is it both creates excitement, it draws people of all ages, and it also just, has a feeling of love and joy. And then, this wonderful young Portland chicken, he just said it so beautiful. He said, it feels like we're winning. Like they're showing this action to be so ridiculous. And then he said, I believe the hard work, listen to this, the hard work people have done to create a culture of discipline and a culture of whimsy is helping us. A culture of discipline and a culture of whimsy. I've just been thinking about that because it makes me think of that Blaise Pascal. He was born 400 years ago. He was that mathematician, philosopher, and I've talked about this before. He wrote about the pairing of opposing virtues, like putting two things together that sometimes we might not think go together, like being frugal and generous, which I love. Like either one of those things by itself is not such a great thing. Like if you're really, everybody's known the person who's so frugal, right, that it's just like miserly and no fun and small. But the person who's frugal and generous, right? I mean, like frugal, like let's get all the toothpaste out of the toothpaste, right? I mean, like but generous. I mean, I want to be frugal and generous. That's what I want to be. And disciplined and whimsical. I got disciplined, right? I have run outside every morning. I don't care if it's -4 or 104. I'm almost to 3 years in a row without missing a day. But whimsy, ask my kids, I'm the least fun mother. Like, I was like, the least fun mother, here she is, right here. I'm trying to be more fun. I'm going to have grandchildren. I'm going to be fun, right? But, but you put those two things together, right? Whimsy. I mean, I don't know if you did get out to a rally. I haven't had that much fun. I haven't felt that light. I haven't felt that hopeful. Like, oh my gosh. I mean, it was just so colorful and funny, right? So whimsy. Like, how is that? And how in our own personal lives? I sit down for lunch and coffee with people and they have their birthday. And I always say, what are you looking forward to? And what do you need to do? And what do you think? And sometimes people are like, I really need to lose weight. And I really need to exercise more. And I really need to be more disciplined. I need to get better sleep. But then a whole lot of people right now are like, I want to do more art. I want to make more use more clay. I want to get my trombone out. Like play, because whimsy is a way of also saying we're going to survive and we're going to live and we're going to go forward. And I think about Peace Church and our little journey, and I'm going to talk about this next week because COVID, sad to say, best thing that ever happened to Peace Church. And one of the things it did was it took us from 2 services to 1. We weren't even online, thank you to me, because I'm so old-fashioned. And then overnight we had to go on Zoom, and overnight we had like 200 people watch, because guess what? It's more interesting than a lot of things that people have to watch, right, at that moment, right? And people were like, we just had, some of you remember, the worship service lasted, 35 minutes maybe, because what could we do, right? But then there would be like 30 minutes of people this was in the early days of COVID, when nobody could see anybody. And people would stay on there, and they would visit, and they would share. And they were just so happy to see the face of someone that they did not live with, because they were really tired of that face. But then what was the very best thing of all? Anybody remember? Cecilia Owen's joke. Cecilia was 6. She was 6 at the time, and it might have been a couple of weeks into it. Jennifer was like, Cecilia has a joke. Well, the joke is like, why'd the chicken cross the road? It was like a 6-year-old joke, right? Every single week, people would be like, does Cecilia have a joke? Like people, who was not hanging on for dear life by that joke? It was like, and then it wasn't just Cecilia's joke. Then I think, as it turns out, we had Irish dancing, and then we had like Elliot like showing us his Legos and somebody else doing their, we actually had a talent show of kids. I think they were tumbling, but it was just like, anything, right? But the whimsy and the joy. And so it's like, how do we hold all of this together? I think at the heart of it, some of it is knowing what we really believe and what really matters to us. And when the Portland chicken was interviewed, he said, at some point I decided I had to put my life and the movement together, that the world that was coming was nothing like the world that I expected. And I had to get off the sidelines and do everything I could. And Giat just covers it by saying his statement is just what we need. It reminds us that our choices today shape the future we will have. and that anyone can take actions that model their values and encourage others to do the same. I have no idea if the judge in Luke's parable was really afraid the woman would give him a black eye. I have no idea if Mike Johnson is really afraid of the people, middle-aged people like me riding a bike without my child. It sounds sort of funny to me. But this I do know, that there is somehow on this grand connection we live in, some creative force for love and wisdom and good that is calling us all forward. And we all have such deep resources and gifts, from our discipline to our whimsy to everything in between. So may we find a way to pull all of that out, to offer it into the world, and to persist, and to persist, and to persist. Amen.